professional development presentations, and AACE publications. AACE arms our members.
You've just muted the audio there. Vanessa, when you muted yourself, that muted the audio to that video as well.
Say it again, Andrew, please.
Hi.
When you muted that video, when you muted your audio, it muted the audio from that video as well.
And also we find dialogue and mentoring keep improving professional.
So you need to keep your audio open.
Okay. I'm muted. I will mute myself so it will not feedback.
No, don't you mute yourself, because that is muting the audio to your video.
Further, as professionals, we believe we should improve return on investment.
Is there an audio from the video?
Through the rigor of front-end loading.
Yes, there is, but I think it's coming through your system.
We act on these tenets, we believe. Deliverables to the project management.
Andrew?
Yeah.
So that's why
I muted myself for like past minute. Did you hear any audio from my video shared?
The audio from your video also muted at the same time.
Mm.
Hello.
Hello, Saad.
Hi, Andrew.
So 58 people on the call and rising. How are you doing, Vanessa?
Hey, finally I'm here. How are you, Andrew?
I'm good, thank you. I'm hiding in a little cubby hole.
It's okay. Gorgeous as usual. Hi, Vanessa. How are you? We're already live, right? I think we started 6:15 today. Just we starting in 5 minutes. We starting 6:30. So if the participants are waiting for us to start, we will be starting in 5 minutes.
Oh, up to 72 attendees now. That's a good crowd joining us.
I think most of the people will be joining by 6:30. We have plenty of registries, actually exceeding the number actually of the subscription. So
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Can Vanessa hear us? Hello, Vanessa. Just playing all the videos.
Vanessa, can you share your sound? Because I think we cannot hear these videos.
Apologies for that side. I did not clearly hear. What did you say?
Can you share your voice? Because I think we don't. We
audio?
cannot hear. Yeah, the audio. We cannot hear the videos itself. I think these videos are saying something, right?
How about that?
From electronic magazines and newsletters to our series of professional development webinars, members benefit from specialized expert knowledge. We host online.
Can you make it loud a little bit?
All right.
Post questions, discuss topics, and provide professional development. Our members have 24/7 access to world-class resources, AACE's body of knowledge, and virtual library. Members receive discounted rates for conferences, continuing education seminars, certifications, professional development presentation, and AACE.
Let's allow 5 minutes extra time for others to join.
Yeah.
Let's start at 35.
Yes.
On time and on cost, while meeting investment and operational goals. We have been the leader in the cost and management industry since 1956, with members in 100 countries and over 80 local sections. Success is not a big step in the future. Success is a small step taken right now. Find out more at web.aacei.org/membership and join AACE International today. Hi. We believe it's fulfilling to enhance your professional skills and knowledge. And also we find dialogue and mentoring key to project portfolios and benefit from effective and proven project management and return on investment estimating methodologies, of which further as professionals, we believe should improve return on investment as the project progresses through the rigor of front-end loading to execution and to operations. We act on these tenets, we believe, through our regular events, seminars, networking, and mentoring opportunities, and our excellent professional recommended practices and formal certifications round out the core deliverables to the project management community. So that's why I am AAC. And we look forward to welcoming you and working with you in support of your professional development. Thank you.
Running's the best way to lose weight, right? That's actually wrong.
Would you enjoy earning more than your peers? What about specialized training and networking opportunities that will help you advance your career faster toward success? Members of AACE International enjoy these benefits and much, much more. AACE gives its members the tools they need to prosper. From electronic magazines and newsletters to our series of professional development webinars, members benefit from specialized expert knowledge. We host online communities to allow members to network, post questions, discuss topics, and provide professional development. Our members have 24/7 access to world-class resources, AACE's body of knowledge, and virtual library. Receive discounted rates for conferences, seminars, certifications, professional development presentations, and AACE publications. AACE arms our members with the technical tools and expertise to complete projects on time and on cost, while meeting investment and operational goals. We have been the leader in
Vanessa, you are muted.
CEI.org/membership and join AACE International today. Hi. We believe it's fulfilling to enhance your professional skills and knowledge. And also we find dialogue and mentoring key to improving professional capability. We believe all business opportunities and project portfolios can benefit from effective and proven project management and return on investment estimating methodologies, of which cost engineering and analysis are a major contributing component. Further, as professionals, we believe we should improve
I believe we have quite a number of participants in the webinar now. So let's begin the technical webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you all for joining us in our second technical webinar organized by this year's committee team from AACE Qatar section. I will quickly introduce myself. My name is Vanessa Gallego, the section secretary for this year. I am a certified planning and scheduling professional, which is based in Qatar. And outside of AACE, I work as a full-time forensic planning consultant for Quantum Global Solutions. Before we start the presentation, let me spend a few moments to explain the housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and can be shared with any of your colleagues who are unable to join. A certificate of attendance will be provided for today's webinar. The Zoom chat forum is enabled for attendees to give feedback and comments during the presentation. Please post your questions in Zoom's Q&A forum, which we will aim to address at the end of the presentation. Finally, before I introduce our guest speaker, I'm delighted to introduce the AACE committee team who works hard in the background to put on events like this. This year's team is headed by Mr. Sadegh Ghazi and supported by last year's president, Mr. Anil. And flashed on your screens are the 9 other committee support team members. AACE Qatar team is committed to strengthen our organization in Qatar by rolling out our plans and initiatives, which we published on Qatar Tribune on 19th July 2021. If you have some time, please have a read to know our plans and initiatives. For any membership inquiries, please do not hesitate to reach out to our committee through social media. I would like to welcome AACE Qatar Section President, Mr. Sadi Ghazi, to give us some few words.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. This is the honor to be with you moderating this today. I just actually, I don't want to say any words. I just first would like to thank you for organizing this, for taking care of all the background works, because starting from organizing it with Andrew till the finalization until the live today. And I would like to welcome Andrew. I know that this is not the first time he's speaking to AACE. I hope not the last. Thank you so much for your time and for your support. And I leave it to you again, Vanessa, to introduce Andrew, and I'm going in the background, helping with the other team to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sad, for your kind words. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Andrew Woodward, who is a chartered civil engineer with more than 30 years experience in complex civil engineering and infrastructure projects. Andrew is based in Qatar and brings detailed construction knowledge and experience to the region to help parties in matters of dispute resolution, arbitration, expert opinion, as well as difficult issues of quantum and delay. Andrew is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and a practicing party-appointed expert witness. But before I hand over the floor to Andrew, I have some couple of poll questions that will guide us through this seminar to give a bit of a background for Andrew and for the rest of the committee team. The first is, what would the delegates choose as their go-to delay analysis methodology? You can select either impacted as planned, which is IAP, the commonly known TIA, the time impact analysis, Windows analysis, and last but not the least, the APAB, or the as planned versus as built. So I'll launch the poll now. I'll give you 30 seconds to complete your votes. Oh. I see a very good result here, as I think, as I expect. As I said, commonly used delay analysis. Still, votes are coming, polls are coming. %, haven't voted yet. Please do your vote now. I'll get to end up the poll so we can focus on our presentation later on. So I think you can all see the result is half of it is a TIA, go-to delay analysis methodology, and then followed by the Windows analysis with 29%. And then third is the as planned, as built. Last is the impacted as planned, just 8%. So I'm gonna end this one and then do another poll. If you can see now, the result is 48% the TIA. I'm gonna do the second poll. Oh, apologies for that. Our second poll is, what constitutes completion in prog? Would it be project as 100% complete, or project as 95% complete, or when the employer actually is using the facility? Votes are coming. Please cast your votes now. We're getting a surprisingly vote as almost half of it. Okay, I've got to end the poll now. So the poll says 50% when the project is 100% complete. That seems for them constitute as the project completion. And then second is when the employer starts using the facility. That's 43%. And last, with 8% of the attendees, is 95%. They would think that the project is completed. Now, with a bit of the feedback from our attendees, I think Andrew now is excited to start his presentation. Isn't it, Andrew? So, Andrew, the floor is yours now. Let me stop my sharing so you can share your screen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the feedback on the questions. Let me share a screen and I'll start my presentation and take it from there. Hopefully you can see my slides and I'll launch the presentation.
Yes, I can see that, Andrew.
Great, brilliant. Okay, well, very interesting feedback from the questions and answers there. Probably is no surprise, time impact analysis seems to be the favorite delay analysis methodology within your members. And so we're obviously going to have an interesting discussion today with these slides.
Excuse me, Andrew. There's a feedback from the chat saying your volume is a bit low.
I apologize. I shall talk a bit louder. Hopefully
Okay, thanks for that.
So interesting feedback, and no surprise that time impact analysis is probably the most popular form of delay analysis methodology amongst your members. So hopefully my slides will be of interest, because I probably won't be talking about time impact analysis too much. Also interesting, the question around completion, and interesting that your members think that a project is complete when it's 100% complete, or it's complete when the owner or the employer has started using the facility. Again, very interesting observations, and we will have a discussion about that in some other slides. So the presentation for today is going to look at delay analysis and its applicability with arbitrations. And the slides that I've developed and presenting here are practical examples. So hopefully I'm going to give your members a taste of some practical examples of delay analysis at arbitration, and so they can reflect on that in their day-to-day business. So I should be looking at the context and an introduction to the issues. I'll talk about some typical delay analysis that is common pre-dispute, and I think our poll chimes with that in terms of TIA. I'll then talk about methodologies that the tribunals are looking for, so what the tribunals expect to see. I'll then talk about what actually delay is, because sometimes delay is more than just things being stopped. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that. And then I'll make some observations specific for arbitration or litigation. And then I'm going to go through as planned, as built as a particular methodology. Because at arbitration, as planned, as built is perhaps the most favoured methodology, or the methodology that tribunals look for. And then I'll touch on what your duty is at an arbitration if you're acting as an expert. And then I'll give a little bit of a summary and a wrap up at the end. And I believe these slides will be available to your members, Vanessa. Okay, to give some context and some introduction to the issues. There's a contract agreement at the commencement, and with that contract agreement, the employer agrees to pay the contractor the contract sum, and he's going to pay that in return for the contractor to construct the works, and to construct the works within the time for completion. I apologise, part of my screen is obscured. So just in context with FIDIC 99, which is a very common form of contract, clause 14.3 deals with the contract sum and contract payments. Now, the contractor is to construct the works in the time for completion, and clause 8.2 talks about time for completion. If the contractor is then late in constructing the works, he either accepts he's late and pays the employer liquidated damages, or the contractor will go and seek relief. And the first step for that is to raise a notice. A notice under FIDIC is under the clauses 1.8, 1.9, 2.1 and 8.3. And we can see it's errors in documents, lack of drawings, access, or there's an event that's coming along down the line that is going to cause a delay. The contractor is then obliged to keep contemporary records and make his claim based on those records. And that's dealt with by clause 8.1, sorry, 20.1, I apologise. And then there's then a duty on the employer to settle those claims. Perhaps sometimes he doesn't realise that, but there is a duty there. And importantly, he should be settling interim claims, and he's to receive interim claims precisely because he specified the notice and time bar provisions. So that normally has a 28-day cycle on it. So claims would be raised regularly. And then, of course, we get to the final account, and the employer would be making determinations, or the engineer would be making determinations under clause 3.5. When the contractor is making a claim, there's this principle that he must prove whatever he is asserting. So the terminology is he who asserts must prove. And so that places an obligation on the contractor to do some form of delay analysis to demonstrate his entitlements. And the common methodologies that we see is impacted as planned as built, Windows and TIA, which you're all very familiar with. And just an observation on that, and the observation I make is the methodology is not specified in contracts. In my 8 years in Qatar, I've only seen specific clauses that deal with specifying delay analysis methodologies only once in one contract. So typically under the contracts that we see, the contractor is to choose his methodology that he feels that is appropriate. However, we commonly see the employer and the engineer demand or specify a particular type of analysis, which is typically TIA. And so it is no surprise that TIA appears to be a common form of delay analysis methodology. And unfortunately, that disagreement or that choice of the methodology can actually be the start of disputes that we see. So just talk about common delay analysis sort of pre-dispute. And so there's impacted as planned and there's time impact analysis. So the choice of pre-dispute delay analysis will vary, and the choice of that methodology is driven by the sophistication of the parties, the jurisdiction, and issues of accountability. As projects get more complex, you will see that delay analysis will get more complex as well. And the complexity can often get increased due to the type of contract, riskier types of contract, or an imbalance in the risk share between the parties, particularly where an engineer is empowered, is not empowered. If he's not empowered to make decisions under the contract, then he will try and defer decisions by trying to make a contractor do more complicated analysis. And then belligerence of the employer as well. There can be with employers some strategy to try and delay dealing with entitlements and claims. The common forms of delay analysis that we see pre-dispute, as your poll has shown, time impact analysis and its variations on that particular theme. Impact is as planned. I come across that a lot more in the Far East rather than the Middle East. It's not particularly sophisticated, but we do see it. Occasionally we see windows analysis. And I'll just talk about the rights and wrongs now of time impact analysis. What is TIA? I'm not going to explain how it works because you all know how the methodology works. So I'll just skip that slide and then I'll just touch on some issues with it. So what's wrong with TIA, and specifically TIA executed in Primavera P6 and its variations? Well, the first observation is P6 is a planning and scheduling tool. It's not really a delay analysis tool. So it's great for planning your sequencing of your works, but for delay analysis, it's not that good. And this is because it's not realistic. It's a computer simulation. It's a model in a computer. It's not based on what's actually happening out of the window. It can be difficult to implement. We see programs with 50,000 lines in them. So that's a very difficult, large model to effectively execute your delay analysis. It is only limited to the events that are notified. There's an obligation or the mechanism relies on inserting delay events into the program. So of course it'll miss the delays that are not notified. There's a focus with the methodology limited to critical delay. So that really only touches on probably no more than 10% of the activities. So there's a question mark over the other 90% of the activities and whether they're in delay. It can be poor at dealing with changes in sequence. And P6 obviously has the functionality called retained logic. It can be also poor at dealing with slow progress, events that are running slowly rather than events that have stopped. It's very poor at dealing with concurrency because P6 works to pinpoint accuracy. You can set the hours that you're going to work to in particular days. The programs themselves obviously can be prone to manipulation, and that manipulation either be hidden or not necessarily seen. So programs can change as the progress updates are passed through. So as a consequence, results really don't match reality, and that's where you start to get the sticking points in terms of not getting an agreement with the engineer or having difficulties if you're at arbitration. Employers, certainly in my experience, don't understand or accept that contractors' culpability is embedded in the process element of TIA. That's just a lack of understanding that we commonly see. It is, in my view, a misuse of a prospective methodology. Why use a forecasting process and a forecasting methodology to deal with something that's happened the day before or last week? So why use a forecast to tell if it rained yesterday? So TIA, in principle, is supposed to be a methodology for the parties to agree a revised baseline at the time the event occurs. But instead, TIA really provides the employer an excuse to defer settlements, and it's actually used as a strategy to to avoid giving interim awards and defer everything to the final account. The real underlying issue is employers want to force a grand bargain at completion, and they want to do that when the contractor has delivered the works and has incurred all the costs. That puts the contractor in the worst position financially, and the employer in the best position to do a settlement that's going to be favourable to him. Now, impacted as planned as a methodology and its particular rights and wrongs, well, it's effectively the same methodology as TIA, but without the progress in it. So it has the same criticisms as we see within the TIA that I've just gone through. It is quick and simple and economical to implement, and it should be no barrier to agreements of relief if liability is already accepted. But I think, as your members quite rightly see, it is not an accepted methodology, and it's probably too simplistic. So the question really is then is what methodologies are the tribunals looking for at arbitration? Well, all methodologies are appropriate, subject to particular circumstances and to particular reasonableness. And we've got the models that you're all familiar with that we've talked about. And if you need detailed guidance on these methodologies, the Society of Construction Law Delay and Disruption Protocol of 2017 and the AECE guidance notes all give plenty of good advice on what these methodologies are and how they can be used. Just as an observation on that sheet, though, you will see that that methodologies number 1 and number 2 are modeling methodologies, and methodologies number 3 and number 4 are fact-based methodologies. So they're about dealing with facts. So I'll explain a bit more about this. So what are the tribunals looking for? What does the law actually say? Well, if you look at the UK case law, which is considered to be informative on choices of methodology, there's some observations to make. We can see terms saying delay analysis should be reasonable. They should be retrospective, and it should be a dissection of facts. Delay analysis should be logical. Delay analysis should identify what's called the factual matrix, and it should involve a form of a critical path analysis. It should rely on and use as-built records. It should use the critical path methodologies, should look at the critical path. It should also be objective, so it should look at things in the round. And so if you look at the Society of Construction Law Delay and Disruption Protocol, it's not holding itself out as best practice, it is holding itself out as good practice. And I believe the AACE guidance notes are the same. So what does this mean? What are the tribunals actually looking for? Well, tribunals are looking for a reasonable dissection of what has actually happened. They're looking for the delays that are complained of to be put into context against progress on the project as a whole. They're looking for something that is sensible and realistic, a realistic presentation of what's actually happened and be based in facts. And then in terms of causation, they want that to be dealt with reasonably using, again, a standard term of the balance of probabilities. They're looking for an identification of all of the primary delays, irrespective of liability. So they're not looking just specifically at what's been notified, which unfortunately TIA focuses in on. So at first instance, what tribunals are looking for is probably an as-planned, as-built type analysis. And it's interesting that that was pretty low down in your poll as a choice of delay analysis. I'll now just touch on what actually is delay. So I'll try to give you some definitions. So some important definitions that I think are important to think about. First one is overrun. And projects overrun, activities overrun. So it's something taking longer to do. And then prolongation is a common term. That's also something specific taking longer, often leading to a loss. So you get prolongations of the project as a whole, but you can also have prolongation of specific work activities. And then extension of time, I think everybody understands that. It's an extension to the time for completion. And it's about protection from liquidated damages. And typically an extension of time claim would be accompanied with what's called a prolongation cost claim. So for project overruns, if the project is overrunning as a whole, you will claim an EOT. For any other claim that you're making, they all relate to prolongation. So they're prolongation costs, your disruption claims, they're also a type of prolongation claim. And so tribunals are very keen to know what is prolonged on a project, not just the project as a whole, but also for specific activities. Here's some other definitions as well. So we have definitions of critical delay, non-critical delay, and concurrent delay. And as I said earlier, critical delays probably impacts 10% or less of typical project activities. Non-critical delay, well, that's the bulk of your project, 90% or more. Concurrent delay allegedly is rare as unicorn poo. Or is it? We'll probably have a bit of a talk about that in a bit. I think as an industry, the construction industry does fixate on critical delay and concurrency. But at arbitration, I think the bulk of claims really relate to issues around non-critical delay. And I think it's something that's important that people actually miss. Non-critical delay, which is affecting 90% of your project and your program, that's all coupled with the issues of disruption and all of those matters. So 3 types of delay you should consider out of this, arguably. There's the prevention or the stop in terms of I have no access, I have no possession of site. And I think everybody understands that. It's most commonly claimed, and again, it's typically claimed through the TIA analysis. But the other types of delay analysis, the other types of delay involves going slow. So my productivity is low. My efficiency of my teams is reduced. My workflow is disrupted. These are actually the most frequent claims issues, but are very often overlooked in any form of delay analysis. And then the third type of delay, changes in sequence. So this can be, I need to work in a different order or different sequence, or my activities are changing in some way in that I have some additional steps. And again, very often overlooked and missed in delay analysis. All of these delays at arbitration, you need to deal with. You have to deal with these points. So something to consider. I'll now make some observations specific for arbitration. First thing is P6 analysis. Do it at your peril. Avoid P6 rubbish. I apologise for the language there for people who appreciate P6, but only use P6 if you have something to hide, because P6 can and has a danger to make you look silly. There's an example of some delay analysis, expert analysis. That's not done in P6. And then the opposition expert, so the guy on the other side, he's not used it either. And in all of my appointments for matters of delay, in fact, all of the arbitrations that I've been involved with, I've only seen P6 and a TIA presented in arbitration once. And in that presentation, you have to be careful that the tribunals are very clever. And so you don't want to risk this situation in cross-examination. And this is a situation where an expert was claiming 292 days of delay when the tribunal went through his analysis and identified he was only showing a delay of 4 days. So be very careful with P6. It can drop you in it if you're not careful. Now, logic links. Logic links, think about them differently. Don't think of logic links in terms of P6 logic links with lead and lag and predecessors and links to toilets and the thousands of items. If you're going to arbitration, you need to start thinking about the overall work sequence and the general sequence of the delivery of the works as a whole, rather than the particular detail. So you need to understand, has the concrete works completed yet? Has the builder's work to the interior started yet? Have you started to put the cladding on your tower block yet? Have you got permanent power? Have you got wild air? Have you got to a TOC? Has a TOC been issued? So all of these items are what I would call hard points in a program. They are very visual, very clear items of work that you can identify, that you can use to track the performance and the delivery of a project. And it's much more important to think about the big stuff in terms of concrete, cladding and interiors, rather than logic links to a particular toilet that's on a particular floor. I then talk about sub-analysis. Now, again, this is a sub-analysis. This is not a delay analysis. This is part of a delay analysis, but it's got a lot of detail in it. It's got references to evidence. It's got photographs embedded in it. It's got cross-references to exhibits. And at arbitration, the tribunals will pore over these types of presentations at length. And this is an example, was one part of 4 important items within a particular dispute. So lots of cross-referencing to evidence and the photos included to make the issues real. Another observation is don't rely on a single set of data. Go to multiple sets of data. Now, it's easy to look at the progress data in P6. You have this monthly progress data. But can you correlate it with other data? So you've got monthly progress reports. You've then got photos. You've got other submission logs. You've got registers. You've got inspection requests. Can you correlate to this data? So also specific databases. So punch list databases or joint logs, other sorts of data. And then can you map these onto charts to spot inflection points in the data? If you show that you have correlated multiple data sources, that will help you support a position much better and trump the other expert if he's only relying on a single source of data. So this particular chart, as an example, there's 2 data sets in here. The blue line is a progress that comes out of P6 from monthly reporting, but the black line is the level of labour that is deployed to the project. So you can see that the labour deployed on this project is following a similar profile to the amount of progress that is being achieved on the project. So again, getting correlation between data sets can be very helpful to show projects when they are performing. And from that chart, you can probably see that we have a completion somewhere in January or February 2019, simply because we've not got any more labour on the job and the job is finished. Now I'll talk about establishing driving delay. Here's an expert. He's presenting a chart. This chart is showing a light blue line which relates to its non-alloy welding. So there's a particular line there. The purple line, this line here, is to do with alloy welding. So you've got two competing charts, a chart here, two lines, and the expert is saying that the dark blue line, alloy, is ahead of this light blue line, and so this non-alloy line is, the non-alloy line, this later line here, is driving delay because it's later. Now, as an alternative, the other expert presents this chart. Now, this chart is showing and is relying on the same data, but a little bit of a twist. Just to be clear on this chart is showing progress going from 0% to 100% on this chart, and this blue line is behind. Whereas this chart, the difference between the two charts is that the alloy commences at about 40 or 50%, whereas the non-alloy is up at 97%. But then over the same period of time, the alloy goes up to about 120%, whereas the non-alloy goes up to about 110%, 105%. So in this chart, the alloy is behind or driving delay, because the blue starts at the 50% and the non-alloy is at 97%. So two different ways to present the data. And maybe, Vanessa, I think you've got a question or a poll to ask on this. Maybe now's the time to ask the question.
Yeah, I do have that poll. So I'll just do the third poll for tonight, relates to that slide. So here's the poll. It's asked, which chart from Andrew gives the best argument about driving delay? Is it first the chart on the left with the non-alloy? Or is it the chart to the right, which says the alloy is driving the delay? I'm not quite sure whether you're seeing this simultaneously as I do, Andrew, but it shows votes are coming on the right chart. I mean, the chart to the right, which is alloy.
Yes, I can see the poll. Yeah, we've got 74% is saying the chart on the right gives the better argument, and the chart on the left is 27%.
Yes.
I mean, that's really interesting. I'll come clean. The chart on the right is my chart from an arbitration, and the chart.
I would recall. Yeah, sorry for that. I would recall when you did this presentation internally in the company. I mean, you raised this question: which one is the driving delay? And I think the same goes to the result here in the poll, where it says the chart to the right, which alloys is driving the delay, the same result as what we answered. So I'm gonna end the poll now and share the result.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Really interesting feedback. I think just to summarize that point, there's two different charts that are based on exactly the same data. So at arbitration, there was no argument over the base data, but it was all about how the data was presented. And as I say, my chart was the one on the right. But clearly the expert who did the chart on the left, again, he's trying to defend his client's position. So he was presenting the data differently. In a way, there's no right or wrong between those two charts. I think the important observation is for you as an expert, it's really important that you are clear on how you present your data and how you get your message across to the tribunal. Very interesting. I'll just make the other observation as well. none of this is to do with P6 in terms of delay analysis methodology. This was data that was coming out of welding logs. So there was this was a job that involved a lot of pipe work, and so there was lots of records and inspection records related to welding. So that's what this was all about. So again, a great use of a data set that wouldn't necessarily come out of your normal progress data. Okay, so I think we've talked about which chart gives the best argument around driving delay. I'll just talk about concurrency. Now, here's probably a shock statement for you. Concurrency does exist, and it's very common. This definition here, completion, or a definition of concurrency, is completion of something coming together, acting together, and completing at around the same time, to the extent that the events are indistinguishable. So that's a society construction law definition. And again, here's two charts from two different projects. This chart on the left is comparing, again, non-alloy testing to alloy testing. And this chart on the left, you can see that the non-alloy starts earlier, the alloy starts later. But look at the completion. The completion starts to converge, and here we have 95% completion converging, and then completion of all the testing finishing at the same time. So that's a concurrent delay. That's two activities coming together and completing at the same time, to the extent that it's difficult to distinguish between them. And then this chart, it's a similar sort of chart. You can see we've got conduit installation, cabling, and device installation. And you, on face value, you would look at that and say that the device installation is lagging. But look, the lines come together, and they come together at the same time and give a completion at the same time. So these are two projects where it gives a good demonstration that concurrency, in terms of not being able to distinguish between delays, coming together at the same time. So it's probably more, it does happen. There's two examples. Just give you, this is an example of a graphical comparison of delays. And the observation here is simply tribunals love charts. They love summaries that provide them data in an easy way to understand and to digest. So this particular chart compares one expert's analysis to another expert's analysis. And at arbitration, the tribunals really appreciate these types of comparisons to enable them to make decisions. Just be aware of nonsense results. And this is a chart that came from somewhere else. And be very careful in that, in this example, this was involving a dispute over an unreasonable termination. And the expert that provided this chart was saying that the works remained incomplete at termination. But then if you look at the detail, you can see that at the termination, which was the 10th of February, the forecast completion was the 13th of February. So that's 3 days later than the termination date. And then if you think about that on a project that may have been, you know, a year or a couple of years long. So you have to ask yourself the question, if I'm making that forecast, have I shown my analysis to be reasonable? You know, has the expert's forecast completion, which shows that the completion was 3 days beyond the termination date, has that demonstrated, whether accidentally or otherwise, that the termination was actually unreasonable? So as I say, just be careful of nonsense results when you're presenting your analysis. So you're obviously hearing me talk a lot about as planned as built as a methodology, and I'll just try and sum that up as a methodology for arbitration. At a basic level, we are simply comparing a planned to an actual. So we have green bars representing planned periods and blue bars representing the actual. And these bars represent progress over time frames. And so you're reconciling completion dates to identify an overrun. And completion would typically be to a takeover date, a TOC, or as we identified in the poll earlier, it could be to when the employer has taken possession and has got beneficial use. Completion of a project is not when it's 100% complete. Projects never get to 100% complete, or they never get to 100% complete when you would like them to. Completion is down to when the employer is accepting it's complete, or if he's not saying or writing down when he's complete, when he accepts it is complete, it's actually when he starts to make use of it. So delay analysis at a basic level, it's identifying the plan to the actual and looking at intermediate steps as well. Of course, it needs to be more sophisticated than that. So you can augment your delay analysis with S-curves. You can start to show progress. And so that argument about 95% complete, if you look at this chart, this has got to 100% in April 19, but 95% complete is over here in April 18. So on this project, completion is in a window of nearly a year at this point. And the reason why I raised 95% as an interesting observation is that at completion, a contractor will normally get 5% of his retention back. And so the employer thinks that the project is complete, sufficient to start giving the retention back. So if he's retaining 5%, then 95% can be a measure of completion. So S-curves are very good. They can show how the project is supposed to be moving, and you can identify the S-curves from your monthly reports, and you can start to identify where there's peaks in progress or where there's flat spots, and then start to ask questions about why we've got the flat spots. And certainly in this example, 95%, this is an example, this project is complete somewhere between March or April 2018 and maybe not out at April 19. But even that's not enough detail. You can start to put even more detail in. So you can put S-curves into work sections. So here's an example. We're talking about a substructure up to a podium level, and we can see we've got progress. This is concrete works, and it's to do with 3 tower blocks, all on part of the same construction site. So again, you can use S-curves, and you can look at the performance at a trade level. And this will help you deal with what I call the infinite bar issue with P6. I mean, for me, the problem with P6, or one of the biggest problems with P6, is you get massive long blue bars of progress that never quite reaches 100%. And it's typically because a contractor may leave a hole out in the concrete floor because a tower crane is passing through it, or he's left it for access. So in construction, nothing really quite gets to 100% complete. So it's important that you, as a delay specialist, you look to see where you think completion is. And it may be reasonable to make a judgment that something is complete when it's at 95% complete or 97% complete. saying completion is 100% complete is typically not correct. So look at delay analysis on the groups or work sections. That can help you focus on how activities are performing. And these sorts of analyses can be done in your main delay analysis, and you can accompany them in your exhibits. And then we can get to even more detail. Now I talked about exhibits. Here's another exhibit. This is a specific analysis, again, looking at pour records for constructing a raft. And then you can see delays in the pours. We can see the overrun. And then you can do an analysis that shows particular causation as to why these pours have not been correctly poured or poured with a particular delay. Again, we had this chart before. This was a supporting piece of analysis. It became an exhibit, but it was tracing particular events to a timeline. It was giving particular reference to exhibits to identify evidence. It had tied into photographs, and it was identifying what I call a subcritical path specific to that particular activity. So that whole chart was an exhibit and was forming part of a wider delay analysis. And again, contemporary records. This is another example. This is an analysis of submission logs. This is identifying a contractor who's dealing with MEP. He's making submissions to do with electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and he's doing all of these submissions before he starts making any substantive submissions on coordination drawings. So this was an analysis looking at submissions of drawings, engineering drawings, and it identified that there was 18 months of delay before you got to a substantive submission of coordination drawings. So you could see phasing and timing of the submissions between the work scopes. And it identifies 18 months of time consumed before reaching coordination drawings, and then further periods of rework. And what's important about this chart is that this was a chart developed from data from a contractor who was not supposed to be doing any design at all. So if he's got no design responsibility, why is this contractor submitting all of these engineering drawings for electrical, plumbing, HVAC? Why is he doing that when he has no responsibility for it? But it clearly led to an 18-month delay on the project. So again, as an example, that chart itself sits as an exhibit in support of a delay analysis as a whole. And then what's really important then is being able to draw all of this analysis back to a summary, because again, you have to get the message across to a tribunal in a simplistic way. So here's a summary of analysis. So it's not the main delay analysis, but summarizes what has happened. And this identifies critical delay. So here we have critical delay plotted against the particular trades that are in critical delay. And then it identifies these critical delays in windows. And I'll just make the observation here that my use of the term window here relates to that period where that particular trade is in delay, rather than monthly time slices. And I think it's important just to distinguish between, people talk of doing windows analysis and looking at windows on a monthly basis, which is quite right, but you have to differentiate between what's the period of delay that you're looking at whilst the criticality is in one particular trade. So I tend to differentiate between time slices in terms of looking at things on a monthly basis. And for me, a window is the period where the critical path resides within a particular trade. The other observation that I'd make here in this example is the windows change in relation to where the critical path changes between activities. This summary should then account for the critical delay that you see in terms of the overrun on the project as a whole. So however the completion date has moved, that then has to be accounted for both in terms of any delay or acceleration that is seen through the project. And it's a summary that's then presented as an overview to again help present the matters of delay to the tribunal in a simple way that the tribunal can understand it. I would also observe that there's no non-critical delay on this chart. And if you're looking at disruption claims, it's probably likely that you'd have to look at non-critical delay as well elsewhere in your analysis. And then if you're appointed as an expert, what is your duty at arbitration? Well, your duty as an expert is to do with your duty to the tribunal. Your duty is not to prosecute the claim for the people who are paying you. Your duty is to the tribunal, and you are to provide an honest opinion based upon the analysis of the facts and utilizing your expertise as an expert. And if any of you move into doing expert work, there's lots of guidance notes to help you with this. So the RICS, the CIARB, there's expert rules, there's the IBA rules. These are all available on the internet, and they give you very detailed guidance on how you as an expert are required to conduct yourself at arbitration. So I'm now at the summary. I'll just quickly wrap up some key observations for you. These are the key points. So choose your appropriate methodology and refer to the AACE guidance. But as a word of advice, if you're going to arbitration, as planned, as built is probably the most appropriate analysis methodology as a starting point, and you probably need a good reason for not using it. And I say that because it's what tribunals are looking for and what they're asking for. In your analysis, account for the overrun, and I mean that in terms of where you go from the planned completion to your actual completion, and account for the critical delay observed. And on the completion, for me, completion can be either 95% complete, it can be a TOC award, or it can be when the employer has taken use and taken over the facility for his own beneficial use. You as an expert will be required to give an opinion on which you think represents completion. So it can be any of those. Look for hard points in your analysis or key indicators. And for me, the hard points are to do with when things either start or stop. So when is commencement? When is takeover? The good one is power on. When is power available to allow testing and commissioning to start? Simple things like when is the superstructure completed and when is the concrete works completed? When are mock-ups and when are mock-ups approved? They're all key indicators that you should be able to identify in your analysis. Avoid the infinite blue bars in P6, and the way to do that is look at S-curves, look at progress, and instead of holding out for the 100% completion, ask the question, well, if it's not 100% complete, when did I at least get to 95% complete? And that will allow you to narrow down when the project may be getting to completion or activities are getting to completion. Rely on the monthly progress reports. They're called progress reports for good reason, and also include other contemporary records. And by monthly progress reports, I don't just mean the progress data in the progress programs. I'm talking about the progress records, the photographs, the notifications that are being made, and all of the information that is contained within a monthly progress report. And then look for correlations between particular contemporary records. The more of a correlation you can find between records, the more substantive your opinion becomes. Use parallel analysis, create charts and other submissions, and exhibit them, make them exhibits as part of your delay analysis. This is probably really important. Just check the analysis to make sure it makes sense and it reflects reality. Make it real. It has to reflect what's actually happened on site and what has actually happened. Another important point, think about your audience. And I call this the intelligent 10-year-old test. Tribunals are very clever people, but they're given a very, very short amount of time to digest information and to understand it. Particularly if you're going to a hearing may be only a few days long or a couple of weeks long. This is not about talking down to the tribunal. This is about making your evidence easy to understand. And just as an example, if you read newspapers and if you went and bought the Times, the Times is written to an audience of an intelligence of about 10 or 12 years old. So keep things simple. It's not about talking down to your audience. It's about making your message simple and easy to understand in the time that you have. And importantly, focus on the compelling story. And then as a final thought, think beyond the software. So just reflecting back on the first question that we asked, it seems that everybody's very keen to do time impact analysis, which is typically done in P6 and its variations. As you see in the presentation that I've given here, at arbitration, it's very little about time impact analysis in P6. My own personal thoughts is that using Excel is much more flexible and allows you to do much more refined types of delay analysis. So if you aspire to being an expert or you're getting into expert works, don't just think about it's all about P6. You have to think a bit more widely about what you're being asked to do. And now we're in the question and answers stage. Thank you very much for putting up with me.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That is a very interesting and informative presentation. As you said, we go now on the question and answer. Whilst that, let me share my screen so we have something on. Before I go and say a few of my questions, probably are some remarks on it, I'll just pull up some questions from our attendees here. First of all is from Manolito Crescencio. He asked, how can we differentiate the delay between disruption on productivity rate and disruption due to work stoppage by client consultant and or by the contractor?
Well, as an expert, you're being asked to give an opinion on what you think is causing the delay. You have to differentiate between sections of work or portions of work, and you have to differentiate between them stopping, as in physically stopping, or going slow. And I think contractors struggle with this because if work stops, then you should be able to identify resources that have stopped. There'd be resources that are idle, and there'd be standing time. But typically, contractors can't identify the resources that are stopped. those resources will often be redeployed and will be used elsewhere. As an expert, you are asked to provide your expert opinion, and it's down to you to make a decision based upon the records you have, what may be causing a particular delay or a particular stoppage. And sometimes it can be easy. If the employer has not given possession of a site and the contractors all stood there waiting to get on site, it might be easy to say, well, that work has stopped, and it's because we haven't got the possession of the site. So sometimes it can be easy. Other times it can be very difficult. And with that welding example that we talked about, there's an argument about the employer was responsible for the delay in the alloy welding, but the contractor was responsible for the delay in the non-alloy welding. And you can see, well, in the evidence, you can actually see that the two delays are actually competing and coming together at the same time. And then at that point, you're starting to offer opinions on what maybe the percentage share is. And that just comes down to your experience.
I think essentially what I pick up from what you said and from your presentation, I think essentially what is really important is building up the contemporaneous record by those contractors. Because you cannot really differentiate which one is a delay due to the disruption onto the productivity rate, or the delay due to the work stoppage, if you don't have any good contemporaneous records.
Absolutely, yes. If you haven't got the records, you may be able to express an opinion on the delay, but then you'll be in a position where you'll be saying, I can't express an opinion on what is causing the delay. Yeah, absolutely. The records are very important.
Our second question is from Sabir Shaikh. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing it quite well. I'm not around. Is it recommended the disputing parties agree on appropriate method of delay analysis before each embarks upon significant work on and after the event delay and the delay analysis occurred?
Interesting question. And there is an argument that it is good to agree stuff as soon as you can or before commencement. But I do have a problem with agreeing delay analyses methodologies before commencing a project. And again, TIA is probably a classic example of this. TIA as a methodology, I think, is fabulous for the parties agreeing at the time what the impact of a particular event is. And then, because TIA is all about agreeing a revised baseline program. And it should be easy for the contractor and the employer to say, well, here's an event, this is happening now, let's agree a revised program. And TIA is a great methodology for that. The problem that I have with it is it never gets agreed at the time. For various reasons, the engineer won't want to endorse a particular position because it might expose him to some liability. And also culturally within the Middle East, the employer doesn't want to agree anything in the interim. He just wants to leave it to the end when the job's built. And so you can end up with a nonsense situation, in my opinion, where you could get to the end of a project where the contractor should be doing a TIA to demonstrate his entitlements when the project is already finished. And my opinion is that when you get to that point, TIA probably isn't the right methodology to be looking at. So for me, I think it's better if the parties were more realistic about delay analysis and about identifying what's actually happened. And that's not about time impact analysis as a methodology. That's just about agreeing facts in terms of when did I have the power, when did I complete the cladding, you know, when did I finish the work and where is TOC, and then work from that basis. So I don't think I would agree to agreeing delay analysis methodology up front. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that is really your question on that. What specific delay analysis methodology is best suited before, I mean, after when the delay event occurred? I think this next question from Mr. Ahmad Rashid follows on that question, where I said this is just more of a statement where he said the as planned as built is a static method. If I'm not mistaken, that's what he said. And then even AACE highlights that it has, which is the as planned versus as built, has limitations, particularly on complex projects. So do you have any comment on that, Andrew?
I agree. It is a static method, and it's totally retrospective in that it's about agreeing facts around what has actually happened. And if you go into an arbitration, that is exactly what the tribunal is looking for. They want an opinion on what has actually happened, for them to then decide who's liable for what has actually happened. That's precisely the case. There shouldn't be a form of dynamic analysis or dynamism in agreeing something that should actually be crystallized as a fact. So yeah, the tribunal just want to deal with facts. They want to know if welding of pipe has taken 6 months, then it's 6 months, and then they can decide who's liable for that 6 months of delay. You know, it's either because the contractor's been rubbish and not provided the equipment, or it may be because the employer's been rubbish because he's been changing his requirements in terms of acceptability. That's what the tribunal is looking for.
Vanessa, if you allow me, I would like to ask Andrew just a quick question.
Of course, Mr. President. Go ahead, please.
Okay, methodology stuff, because it interests me always. During most of my appointments, either as an expert or even sitting as an arbitrator, I'm seeing always the expert have the tendency or the selection of the methodology sometimes would consider some other elements, not only but presenting the best facts. Sometimes the element is the size of the dispute, the time allowed to finalize the expert report. I've seen some expert has been engaged like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, which is, I consider myself that it's, if he will not be able to produce a proper report, he shouldn't accept the appointment from the beginning. But sometimes there's a very limited small cases would require some people to just produce a report in 2-3 weeks or something like that. And also, so some of the experts would go to uncomplicated methodologies. So do you agree that the size of the dispute, the time allowed for analysis, and also some other factors, specifically the cost as well, because the more the expert will engage in more complicated methodologies or different methodologies, the more facts he will dig in, he will cost his clients basically more money, which is going to increase the dispute amount basically, and the arbitration cost or the dispute cost. So I don't know, what is your opinion about that one?
I totally agree with you. Your choice of methodology must always be appropriate to the matters at hand, and that also includes the scale of the dispute, the size of the dispute, and the economics of it for the parties. It's not appropriate to do really detailed analysis for a dispute that is monetarily quite small, and or equally, if it is a simple issue, then it may only need a simple methodology to describe that issue. The choice of methodology must always be appropriate to the circumstances that are being argued. My personal opinion is I would always go to an as planned, as built, because you can do it, excuse the term, on the back of a fag packet, and it really is just looking at key dates in terms of where the completion date has moved and where particular hard points are moved in the program, and it could be scaled up or scaled down as required. But equally, time impact analysis, can be appropriate. Impacted as planned can be appropriate, particularly if you've got a change, say very early on in a project, where the works haven't really probably started very much. It always has to be appropriate to the level of the dispute and the size of the dispute.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sad. Thank you for your question. In line with the arbitration subject, a question from Felix Soto. He asked, what happens if the contract mandates the use of TIA? Can we still use as planned versus as built for the arbitration?
I've been working in disputes for 10 years. I've been in the Middle East for 8 years. I've only seen one contract in those 10 years that specifically specified TIA as a delay analysis methodology. I would always advise contractors to go and read the contract. And if you read the terms of your contract, it is highly likely that the type of methodology is not specified. I've seen lots of contracts that use the terms TIA, and it's used quite liberally in contracts, but it's not referred to in terms of delay analysis. I would always say go and read the contract first, because it's more likely that the methodology is not specified. And then I would always then advise a contractor to look at the circumstances and where they're going with the project. I'd also just urge some caution to contractors in looking at, where is the project going? Is there an appetite to settle, or is it moving towards a dispute at the end? You have to take a call on it. I have seen contractors who will use an as planned as built methodology because they know they're never going to get an agreement with the employer, and so they're starting to prepare themselves when they have to make formal submissions at a dispute. I hope that answers the question.
Can you hear me clearly? Because it's a lot time, I think. So prayer is happening in the background. So excuse me for that. Another question about this arbitration case that we are under the umbrella of the topic. Palani Vel Rajan asked, what if one party uses a TIA and the other party uses as planned versus as built? How do you think the tribunal will evaluate this condition? This instance, which method is more appropriate, assuming both parties reflects very close delay analysis result? Though, take note, that they've used different type of delay analysis methodology.
Yeah, that's very simple. If the experts use different methodologies, that they of course run the risk that the analyses will come out with different results. In my experience, the results may not be wildly different, but they'll come out with different results. What the tribunal will do, however, is they will look at the testimony provided by the experts in the round, and they will make a judgment on who they think is giving the more compelling evidence and the more compelling opinion. And the tribunal will decide whether they take either one particular expert's view or the other expert's view. And that's what the tribunals decide. That's what they're paid to do.
From an anonymous attendee, he asked, or she asked, in case works are taken over prior to the actual 100% completion date, because I've raised this question on top of, because there's so many questions being rolled down the Q&A forum. So I just got to pick and select which one relates to the poll questions earlier. So this one, I think, relates to the poll question we raised earlier. So then he asked, the attendee asked, if in case the employer takes over the project prior the 100 completion date, and if in case delays happen after the employer took over the project, the facility, how and what terms can the contractor use to still claim those delays on top of the employer?
an interesting observation.
Yes,
I think the common situation that we see is that the employer will take over the site and start getting beneficial use, but will refuse to issue a takeover certificate. Excuse me. For example, you know, an employer might take over a tower block and start moving into some floors, but because the tower block's not complete, he refuses to issue a takeover certificate. Sorry, excuse me. And I think the observation is that, as another example, an employer may try to refuse to take over because he doesn't want to take the liability for it. He'd rather the liability stay with the contractor. And that might be, you know, insurance issues or things like that. The long and short of it is you either have a takeover certificate which specifies the date of when it's taken over, because that drives the defects correction period and drives the insurance provisions. If the takeover certificate is not issued, then you do look at the employer and look to see if he's actually using the facility. And if he's in there using the facility, if he's occupying it and he's getting beneficial use out of that facility, he has taken it over, irrespective of whether he's written the takeover certificate or not. And so at arbitration, if it went to a dispute, the experts would be expressing an opinion on where takeover is. And certainly the experts would be looking to see if the employer, if he's in the facility on a particular date and he's using it, putting his equipment in there and starting to get what they call beneficial use, then that is takeover, that date, irrespective of whether he's failed to produce any formal takeover certificate down the line. And in terms of claims and delay analysis, it's still the same thing. You just got to resolve you know, where takeover is. That point of takeover should reflect when the works have actually stopped. Or I think the chart that you saw where there's a curve and the manpower drops right down. I would hope to see the manpower disappear off the site around where takeover is, because any manpower you've then got on site after that date is really just doing snagging or tidying up type works. So it's about things like that you need to look at.
I think we're running out of time. It's already 8 in the evening here in Qatar. I'll just take one last question from our colleague here, one committee member, Mr. Alexi Liobimi. He asked, is there any difference in approach to concurrency and entitlement to compensation for delayed damages between tribunal approach in arbitration and the AACE 29R03 or the SCL protocol?
I don't think there's any difference between the SCL protocol and the AACE, but I think there's a world of difference between our understanding as construction professionals of what concurrency is and what engineers think it is in terms of how it affects prolongation. I mean, to put it very simply, if an employer and an engineer accepts that a project is delayed because the employer has defaulted or changed something, then there is a prima facie case for the contractor to receive not only an extension of time, but also to receive his prolongation costs. And so that the evidential liability is flipped, because if the employer doesn't want to pay the prolongation costs, that's actually an employer claim, and the employer should be providing evidence as to why the contractor is not entitled to his prolongation costs. Now, that's a different argument. That argument about prolongation costs is not actually about concurrency. You know, concurrency, as I showed in the chart, is about two delay events that you can't distinguish between that are driving an end date. So they're two events that are acting together on the critical path. And I think construction professionals in general don't understand that. And in my experience, engineers deliberately misrepresent that concept. And again, I'll put it very simply. If the employer accepts that there is an entitlement to an extension of time, there is also an entitlement to the prolongation costs. You can't just simply say, well, Mr. Contractor, you're rubbish over here, therefore I don't want to give you prolongation. That's nothing to do with concurrency, because that's not identifying a delay that's on the critical path. If you look at the AACE descriptions and the SCL descriptions, it describes concurrency in terms of two events acting at the same time on the critical path. And that's the challenge that needs to be put to the engineer when you're looking at these claims. Because it is actually, it's an employer's claim back to the contractor, and he should be evidencing it.
I would like to apologize to the other attendees who posted questions. We still have 43 questions. I will try to coordinate with Andrew in the next few days so we can try to address all these questions and give the feedback alongside the certificate and the copy of your presentation slides. But aside from that, Andrew, I mean, you've just got to read what they've said in the chat box and in the Q&A box. They appreciated your presentation. It's very insightful, informative. And with that, on behalf of AACE Qatar, I would like to thank you. Thank you, Andrew, once again for your very informative presentation. We appreciate your time and effort in sharing your expertise and knowledge in the field of delay analysis. If Sad has anything to say, I mean, please do, Mr. President.
No, thank you so much. You said enough. Thank you again, Andrew, for your time. And thanks for this presentation. We took more than actually we were supposed to take on this presentation. I know that there are plenty of questions. It was a very informative information for our attendees. Our participant number actually today was very big. I think as Vanessa said, we will try to pass this information or these questions to you, and whatever you will be able to answer it, it's up to you. And can you put the slides, or we have on the slides, there is your email address as well. So I think if people can address any questions to you, which will be perfect if you will be able to reply to it, and that's it. Thank you so much again, Andrew.
Yeah, we'll make the slides available, and there's some contact details if anybody has some pressing questions. But
and thanks to Vanessa actually for organizing the whole thing since the start. She has done a wonderful job actually moderating and doing this job today. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Andrew. So just last few words. I hope that everyone has gained few takeaways from Andrew's presentation today. I thank everyone for your attendance, and see you all again next time on the next webinar. Have a great evening all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.